Hi everyone, this game is Alex versus Chaz, played on the 20th of October 2018. Two very strong players. Very short game though. I think there's a few lessons to be learnt here. Let's just dive into it. Okay, d4, let's go. What have we got here? A Slav defense. Okay, knight c3, bishop f5. Now usually black will want to take on c4 first before playing bishop f5. Bishop f5 straight away runs into a bit of trouble. This queen jumping out to b3 can be very irritating, attacking this b7 pawn and putting pressure on d5. You don't play it straight away, but I got a feeling that just simply taking here is very strong. For example, if the pawn takes back, you go queen b3, and how does black respond to that? It's a painful, according to the engine, the best thing to do is bishop back to c8 again. So like, let's look at a few options. Something like queen d7 is terrible because of knight e5, and b6 is just awful because of e4. I know that looks like it's strange, but think about what the options are here. If he takes, you go knight e5, and because the pawn's not on this diagonal, you've got this threat of queen coming in here, and throwing a bishop in the way runs into things like bishop check here, and as you can see, there's all sorts of nasty things going on here. A move like this is just answered by d5, and this is why the bishop check was important, to block the queen from defending d5. And as you can see, black is all tied up in knots, in quite a bit of trouble. And yeah, so b6 is obviously not good. Going back to this idea of playing e4, not e4, after b6, the idea of playing e4, like, look at the other options. If the knight takes, for instance, and yeah, there's actually a couple of good moves here. I think you could just take this with the queen if you wanted to. But yeah, knight takes e4 is apparently a thing. So if the bishop takes here, for instance, this bishop b5 check is pretty nasty. The knight hopping in the way, and then knight e5, and the only way to defend it is with bishop f5, and then the queen comes in. As you can see, the pressure on d7 is enormous, and on top of that, there's a threat of mate on f7. And this queen's also eyeing this rook, and it's pretty hard to deal with all this. The obvious bishop here, there's some pretty surprising answers to moves like this. For example, knight takes d7 is really interesting. This is answered by quite an amusing double check mate. And bishop takes knight is just answered by this, and the queen has to take, and then the rook gets taken. So this is sort of stuff that can happen when queen b3 comes in. You suddenly, all sorts of tactical ideas like e4 come into existence that didn't come into existence, weren't there before. So yeah, b6 gets answered quite spectacularly with e4. Other options like queen b6, for instance. In a position like this, you can probably just take the queen and just be happy that you've wrecked your opponent's pawn structure like this. So just play a simple e3. And the material is equal, except black has doubled isolated b pawns, and it's a very comfortable position for white. I don't see how white's going to be in trouble. This b5 square can be occupied by a knight or a bishop, and it can be a bit of a pain for black to deal with. So anyway, so yeah, after bishop f5, straight away as white, you should be looking at ways to take and then throw queen b3 in. Sometimes queen b3 straight away is the way to play. Just putting that sort of that sort of pressure you get from queen b3 is just quite devastating. Black should really change his opening, and I suggest he look at these lines here. The great thing about sticking a pawn on c4 is it actually takes away the b3 square. The queen b3 is not an option anymore, and you're threatening to just play b5 and just hang on to your extra pawn. So if your opponent tries to get too ambitious and play e4, you can play b5 here. And you're kind of hanging on to your extra pawn. It's probably not worth much, but because your opponent has the center. But it's still it's a bit of a it causes white some problems in that white has to find the right moves. Otherwise, black is just a pawn up. Okay, so what was that? Bishop f5. So white kind of missed the opportunity to put black under extraordinary pressure with some queen b3 ideas, and decided to play bishop f4. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this move. It's perfectly fine and normal and natural move. Get the bishop out so you can play e3. Just miss it. It's the thing that's wrong with it, not really wrong, but is that you had much better options available to you, or a much better option. Okay, black now played e6, and black should be very happy with this position. He's got some kind of some kind of defense with these pawns on all the light squares, and he's got his bishop outside the pawn chain. That's why I think queen b3, you should be trying to punish your opponent for trying to get away with too much early on. E3 was played. I mean, even now queen b3 is still seems pretty strong to me. This pawn is very hard to defend. You know, your opponent once again doesn't want to play moves like queen d7 because it runs straight into knight e5. Yeah, but a move like b6, you can kind of get away with that now. There's no surprise e4 push that we had before. And black should be okay. Okay, so e3 was played. Bishop b4. It's kind of just inviting queen b3. White wants to put his queen on b3, and you're kind of just saying, here you go, get it onto b3 with tempo. Your opponent, will have to do something a bit strange here, like queen a5 or something, to prove that his bishop move wasn't a mistake. So I don't like this bishop move here. I really do think instead something like just bishop d6 and trying to trade these bishops off and then castling is a fairly normal position. Okay, bishop b4, rook c1. I mean, it's nothing wrong with the move. It's fine. I just like queen b3 more. Castles. Once again, now queen b3. Queen b3, I keep wanting to play it. It's like always the best move. Whenever this bishop runs out, develops early, it leaves this b7 pawn very, very weak, and white gets a lot of pressure with queen b3. I'll stop talking about queen b3 now. Let's move on. C takes d5, knight takes d5. I mean, the whole point of defending your center with a million pawns like this is because you want to take back with a pawn and maintain a pawn in the center of the board. I like either one of them, really, c takes or e takes. Taking with a knight, I think black is trying to get some pressure on here, and I think there's the immediate threat of winning a rook available, if I'm not mistaken. The threat of knight takes knight, pawn takes, and then bishop a3, and the only safe spot for the rook would be in the corner, and then you go bishop into b2 and the rook is trapped. So it's actually a common tactic. Take, bishop attack, bishop traps the rook. I think that's what he's doing here, but it's very easily stopped. So bishop d3 was played. That does very easily stop it. Queen a5. Okay, yeah, black is trying to get a lot of pressure on this knight here, and is happy to have his pawns doubled to do it. So bishop takes f5. Black should just take the bishop back. Black didn't. Okay, that's a blunder because it lets white take on h7 with check before taking this back here. He found it. Well done to white. He found it. King takes, and now he went off on an adventure with his knight. Knight g5 check. I really do think just taking here leaves white really happy. Like the bishop can take here, and what have we got? We've got equal material. But after king f1, because there's no light squared bishop, your king's quite safe on f1, and the threat of just like knight g5, queen h5, mate ideas is very hard to stop. I think maybe so white found the right ideas. He had the right idea. Let's throw the knight into g5 and try and mate the king, but it just fails really badly, unfortunately, because of this move here. Queen takes g5, because white's queen is on pre. So whoops. So I mean, what is you can't take the queen because you end up losing a whole piece, I think, because the knight takes the queen here. You have to play something like this here, and then yeah, check, and then takes, and then the queen has time to jump into here or something. And I think black is doing okay here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What? 5 pawns versus 6. Black is a pawn up. His king's a little bit exposed, but without a knight to attack it, I think think he's okay. And black is a bit undeveloped. It's probably equal. You know, those weaknesses probably cancel out for the extra pawn. Okay, so king h8 was played. Unfortunately, yeah, that I'm not too happy with that. I think, yeah, what I said before, you just take this knight here and answer bishop here with the king running here, and white's attack is pretty devastating. The threat of just queen h5 is, how do you stop that? You know, a move like g6, for instance, and then h4, and you can sort of see why the king wants to sit on f1 or g1, and is quite happy to leave the rook in the corner, because once this pawn goes to g6, which is going to have to happen at some point anyway, the h-pawn hack starts, and this pawn swaps off of this pawn, and suddenly you've got a rook running down the h-file to join in with the attack, especially with the queen, the knight, and the bishop looking to eye these dark squares at some point, either through here or through there. So, yeah, it's looking really an incredibly strong attack for white. Instead, white, I think, went on the attack a little too early and tried to throw queen h5 in, and this runs into a million discovered checks, and yep, black found the right one, knight e4 check, and the king has to move. So it went to f1, and then the knight just takes the knight, and that's the end of white's attack, and black is just winning easily. So just a little change of move order. White had the right idea, just needed to take this knight first. Either way, the king's going to end up on f1, either from a discovered check or from this direct bishop check. So yeah, just wrong move order. Right idea, wrong move order. Queen h5, and after this, I think the game is pretty much over. f6 was played, rook c5. I mean, yeah, the bishop's pinned to the queen. Here, if the queen took instead, that gets rid of that tactic. So that's actually a stronger move, but it should be a very easy win for black, because after takes, black is just a whole knight up without any danger to him whatsoever. So white took with the bishop with the idea of trying to keep the queens on the board to try and turn this attack into something, but it just results in a bishop just getting taken. So rook c5 is a way to save the bishop and try and set up some sort of thing on the king. Maybe he's looking at bishop h6 and some sort of sacrifice that results in a perpetual check. So it's a clever idea. Sack this rook and try and do something. So the bishop took on c5, and now he went queen g4. So he's trying to get the check in here and check along the light squares. Can white play something like bishop here? I mean, this is another way to play it. You're kind of hoping that he just takes, and then you can just go, oh wow, draw, check, 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 check. So we obviously can't take, and by sitting in h6, you're also pinning the bishop to the queen. So the bishop will want to move to a spot where it defends the queen. I mean, there are some annoying checks that get the bishop out of danger as well. But let's say the bishop were to move here to defend the queen, then you could try something like this, and you know you've got ideas here of trying to get a checkmate. I think they're actually quite easily stopped, but it's worth a try at least. You know, maybe you can march these two pawns up the board and go g5 and try and swap them off that way, with the king hiding in amongst these squares here. Okay, what was played? Queen g4, and yeah, that means he can just take the bishop. Queen e6 check, rook f7. Yeah, so here's the attempt at trying to get a perpetual check, hoping that the king will run out here and the queen can take the rook and then maybe set up some sort of check, 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 check later on. But unfortunately, the bishop just drops back, and that's the end of the game. White did try to open the h-file, take the pawn, get the rook into the action. This queen ran into here, which is a very annoying counter move. Well done to black for finding it, because if pawn takes pawn, then just queen a1 and then queen grabs the rook in the corner. So to stop that, white played rook h3 with the idea of taking it later, and then black just pushed past it and said, no, you're not opening the h-file on me. This rook tried to wriggle out here, and unfortunately there's not much more to this game. And oh, checkmate. Wow, yeah. The threat of mate. There's actually nothing white could do about it, to be honest. So takes, checkmate. And that was the game. It looks like a slaughter, like black just smashed white on your first look at it. But when you actually analyze the ideas that was going on, you realize white actually was on the brink of winning that for throughout the middle of that game. So it's actually very strong play from both sides. Very good defensive play by black, and very good attacking ideas from white. Just got to get that move order right. Just take the knight first, allow your king to get hit the f1, and then you had a winning mating combination. So you saw the right idea, just had to find the right moves. Good stuff. That was very entertaining. I hope everyone else enjoyed that game, and I hope people learned some things from it. That's it for now. Goodbye.